Good evening, everyone. Good evening and welcome to our first Starfest event of 2022. I'm Michelle Steinhusen. I'm the festival director, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. We're coming together online from many different places, but the St. Albert Public Library sits on land that is Treaty 6 territory, Métis Nation Region 4, and the St. Albert Sturgeon Métis Local. Wherever you're joining us from, we're all privileged to share stories together on this land. And we have such a treat for our inaugural Starfest event of the year with Nita Prose talking to us about her best-selling debut novel, The Maid. And Nita is in excellent hands with Starfest alumna Amy Jones. Amy delighted our audiences at the 2019 Starfest Festival. That year, we featured Amy's critically acclaimed novel, Every Little Piece of Me, which explores the intense friendship between two young women whose every move is chronicled on the public stage. Her first novel, We're All in This Together, won the Northern Lit Award and was a finalist for the Stephen Leacock Medal for Humor. Her short story collection, What Boys Like, won the Metcalf Rook Award and was a finalist for the Relit Award. Currently, she teaches creative writing at the University of Toronto School of Continuing Studies. So very, very busy. Before I hand the evening over to Amy and Nita, I want to point out that this is an interactive event as much as we can. So please add your questions and your comments in the chat throughout the program. Jeff is here behind the scenes if you have any technical questions. You can turn on captioning by clicking live transcription at the bottom of your screen. That's set up for you. If you haven't had a chance to purchase The Maid, we'll provide links to Audrey's books in the comments. And of course, we have The Maid and Amy's books at the library. So I'm going to step off. Enjoy the evening. I'm handing things over to Amy and Nita.
Thank you so much, Michelle. I'm so excited to be back here at Starfest. I just wanted to add that I'm coming to you today from the city of Hamilton, which is situated on the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas, and is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. And as a settler, I'm very grateful to be living and working on these lands and being able to present this Zoom event on these lands as well. So again, thank you to everyone at Starfest for having me and giving me the chance to gush about this book and fangirl a little bit over Nita. I am a writer, but I am a reader first. And one of the greatest privileges for me as a writer is being asked to do these kind of events where I get to chat with other writers and ask them the types of questions that come into my head when I'm reading books, and the pressing things that I want to know while I'm reading their books. And so the questions that I'm going to ask are, as an enthusiastic reader, and I hope that if there are other enthusiastic readers in the audience, I know that there are, that you will feel free to ask your questions as well. And we can, sort of have a really good back and forth with Nita about this amazing book that she's written. I'm going to try to avoid spoilers as well, although I'm assuming that most of you have probably read the book already, but just in case you haven't, and you're going to want to after this discussion. So yeah, we'll try to avoid spoilers. So without further ado, I would love to introduce you to Nita Prose. Nita is a longtime editor serving many best-selling authors and their books. Her debut novel, The Maid, is both a clue-like locked room mystery and a heartwarming journey of the spirit. It was a #1 New York Times bestseller, Good Morning America book club pick, a #1 instant Canadian bestseller, Sunday Times bestseller in the UK, and an Irish Times bestseller in Ireland. Nita lives in Toronto, Canada, in a house that is only moderately clean. And I have to say, I was very pleased to read that, because as I sat down at my desk this evening, I looked around and I thought, this is not at all in a state of perfection.
Well, none of us are, Amy. We must forgive ourselves. It's okay.
Exactly.
We can't all be Molly.
It's really the benefit of the little Zoom rectangle, isn't it? That we can crop out everything else around us.
Exactly.
So congratulations, Nita, on the success of The Maid. That is, it's just been, it must have been such a whirlwind for you. Can you tell us how that feels to have your book, you know, topping all of these bestseller lists?
You know, I still wake up pinching myself every morning. I can't quite believe it's actually real. So, and this is, you know, the book came out in January and still I'm like, really? It's really, people want to read this book? I'm like, goodness, this is incredible. You know, one of my favorite things is hearing reader responses, whether people, you know, write to me on my website or I hear from them on Instagram or Twitter. It's just so, I mean, you know this, Amy, from your experience as a writer, there is nothing like that experience of having readers connect with you and that your work means something to them. It's the most wonderful thing and gratifying thing for any writer to have that communication with readers. It's hugely important.
And we have that opportunity now, I guess, in sort of the technological age where we're all able to sort of reach out to or hear from readers in different forums, do events like this where people from all over the world can join in and ask questions. So yeah, I know that feeling. I love that feeling of, you know, sending a book out into the world and then seeing what readers do with it, really, because, you know, at that point, and I'm sure that, you know, you've experienced this from the other side, being an editor as well, of seeing books go out in the world and take on a new life once they get their readership. So it must be very exciting for you to see it from this side as well.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I think you're right that participatory angle, I don't really consider a book finished until it's read. Yes. You know, I do my job as a writer to put the story or elements of the story, enough of it on the page that the reader can complete the story with their own imaginations. And I really do think of it that way. And so it is an experience that is shared between writer and reader, and that completion can only happen with people who are responding to the work.
I love that so much. And talking about completion, maybe first we'll go back to the beginning. I'd really love to hear, I read somewhere, I think that you wrote the prologue to this book on a napkin.
It sounds like a cliche and like I made that up, but it's actually true.
I can believe it, because I think, you know, when there's those moments of inspiration that hit you, you have to grab whatever is available to you, and, you know, I've written things down in very strange places, so I can totally understand. So maybe you can speak to that experience a little bit and how the book sort of started for you.
Sure. So what happened is, you know, as part of my day job as an editor at Simon & Schuster Canada, in 2019, I went to the London Book Fair, and it's a great event which brings together agents and publishers and editors, and we all talk about acquisitions and books and what's new and what's hot, etc. And I went out to a business meeting while I was staying at a London area hotel. I came back a little while later, and it was an odd time of the morning. I opened the door to my hotel room, and I completely startled the maid who was cleaning it. And, you know, Amy, like, I remember exactly like this, like, she gasped and like she, you know, retreated to a shadowy corner in the room. And the truly heinously embarrassing part of this story, are you ready? I mean, it could have been worse, but it was pretty bad, was that she had in her hands my track pants, sweaty in a tangled mess, which, like a fool and a slob, I had left on my bed that morning in my rush to get changed after I went for a run and was running out to this meeting. And so she was completely surprised to see me holding my pants in her hand. And I looked at her horrified. And it just occurred to me in that moment what an intimate and invisible job it is to be a roommate. You know, she'd been cleaning my room every day. She knew so much about me by this point. I knew nothing about her, you know, and it was
it was just one of those funny little kernel episodes that sort of lodges in your mind somewhere. And I wasn't even aware of that happening. I forgot about it. And then a few days later, I was on my plane ride home, and that's when it really hit me. I started to hear Molly's voice, the protagonist from The Maid, and it was clean and crisp. It was polished and precise. It did not sound like me. And I heard it, and I grabbed the napkin from under my drink because I didn't have any paper, and I started to write the prologue, what turned out to be the prologue for this book, in a singular burst on that napkin. And even then, I didn't really know it. But what was happening was that I'd just begun my debut novel.
That is really an incredible story. That's really amazing. And, you know, I love that you say that it began with Molly's voice, because I think that that is what draws readers into this book. And I think rather than, you know, us trying to describe it or talk about it, maybe you'd like to do a bit of a reading so we could hear Molly's voice.
I think I would much prefer to read, and for people to start to those who haven't read the book, start to hear that voice, or at least how it sounds for me. Absolutely. It'll sound different in everyone's head, and that's good. That's a good thing. To give a little sense of who this maid in the Regency Grand Hotel is. So I will read from after the prologue, which I just described, comes this chapter. Chapter 1. I am well aware that my name is ridiculous. It was not ridiculous before I took this job 4 years ago. I am a maid at the Regency Grand Hotel, and my name is Molly. Molly Maid. A joke. The Regency Grand is a 5-star boutique hotel that prides itself on sophisticated elegance and proper decorum for the modern age. Never in my life did I think I'd hold such a lofty position in a grand hotel. I know we're all supposed to aspire to be doctors and lawyers and real estate tycoons, but not me. I'm thankful for my job, especially now, without Gran. Without her, home isn't home anymore. But when I arrive at work, I feel alive again. There is nothing quite like a perfectly stocked maid's trolley early in the morning. It is, in my humble opinion, a cornucopia of beauty. And my uniform, oh, what a joy to see it hanging from my locker, wrapped in clingy plastic, clean, disinfected, freshly pressed, a new beginning. Once I'm uniformed, I know just what to say and do, at least most of the time. The truth is, I have trouble with social cues. It's as though everyone is playing an elaborate game with complex rules they all know, but I'm always playing for the first time. I make etiquette mistakes with alarming regularity. I offend when I mean to compliment, say the wrong thing at the wrong time. It is only because of Gran that I know a smile does not necessarily mean someone is happy. Sometimes people smile when they're laughing at you, or when they're thanking you, though they really want to slap you across the face. Gran used to say my reading of behaviors is improving, but without her, I struggle. Recently, I turned 25, a quarter of a century. My Gran would proclaim now, if she could say anything at all to me, which she can't, because she's dead. Yes, dead. Why call it anything other than what it is? She did not pass away. She did not go gently. She died about 9 months ago. The day after her death, I went to work as usual. Mr. Snow, the hotel manager, was surprised to see me. No one in the hotel likes him very much, but as Gran would say, never mind what others think, it's what you think that matters. And I agree. One must live by her own moral code, not follow like a sheep blindly. Today, at work, I found a guest very dead in his bed. Mr. Black, the Mr. Black, impresario and real estate tycoon. It was around 3 o'clock today when I returned to the Black Suite after cleaning it in the morning. Now, don't think that I'm sloppy or disorganized just because I clean the Black Suite twice. When I clean a room, I leave it spotless. No surface left unwiped, no grime left behind. But this morning, the bathroom was guest occupied, so I had to circle back in the afternoon. I paused outside the Black's door. Housekeeping, I said in a loud but politely authoritative voice. No reply. I took my master key and I buzzed into their suite. It was not as I'd left it a few hours earlier, in a state of perfection. There were several mini bar bottles of scotch knocked over on the glass table, a tumbler beside it, half empty, an unsmoked cigar beside that, a crumpled napkin on the floor, and a divot on the divan where the drinker's bottom had left its mark. A maid's work is never done. I decided to check the bedroom, and that is when I saw him, Mr. Black, flat on his back on the bed. His head was resting on one pillow, not two, and the other two pillows were askew. And of course, my first thought was not that Mr. Black was dead. It was that he was napping soundly after having enjoyed more than one afternoon tipple. Now, I do know something about sound sleepers because my gran happened to be one, but no sleeper rests so deeply that he gives up breathing entirely. I walked over to Mr. Black and I tapped his shoulder. I put 2 fingers to his neck. I checked for a pulse, which I did not find. I called down to the reception desk right away. "Good afternoon," I said. "This is Molly the maid, and I am dealing with an uncommon mess." "Well, call housekeeping," the receptionist replied. "I am housekeeping," I said. "There is a guest who is permanently indisposed." Permanently what? "You see, this is why it is best to be direct and clear at all times." "He is dead," I said, "dead in his bed. Call Mr. Snow immediately." I hung up after that. And then I fainted, as I sometimes do when consciousness becomes overwhelming. Now I find myself here in Mr. Snow's luxurious office. My hands are shaking. My nerves are frayed. But what's right is right. What's done is done. I have a lovely cup of tea and a shortbread biscuit. I suddenly miss my gran. I miss her terribly. I bring the biscuit to my lips, and it crunches so nicely between my teeth. The texture is crisp, and the flavor is delicate and buttery. It is a delightful biscuit. It tastes sweet. Oh, so very sweet. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a really, really fantastic reading. And I have to say, it's so clear to me that Molly, or why Molly has been called by Stephen King the most interesting and endearing main character in a long time, because just hearing you voice her voice, it sounds exactly like I pictured it in my head.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, it really exactly the way I pictured it. And like I was saying earlier, I have stopped thinking of myself as cleaning my house and started thinking of it as returning it to a state of perfection, which it actually never has been in. So it's not really returning, but there is just something about Molly that really, she works her way into your heart from the very, very beginning. And her voice is just so was there any sort of influences that you drew to find that, or was it just like something that came to you and she channeled through you?
You know, I think there was that sensation of a lightning bolt, a voice that really did hit me. But the other thing is that long before I was an editor, I actually worked with special needs students, and they were teens. And it was a really formative time in my life. You know, I went in the role of a teacher, and in so many incredibly important ways, I came out as the student. And these kids were just absolutely jaw-dropping, amazing. They amazed me in so many ways. And one of the things I used to do, of course, was take them outside of the classroom, you know, take them to a restaurant or a cafe or a museum or whatever. And we'd go on these little field trips to investigate the world and just to be out in it. And, you know, most of the time, people around us, regular folks, acted, you know, normally, nicely, kindly even, except for sometimes. And those sometimes were utterly unpredictable and have never, you know, left my mind. When people, regular people, acted with so much casual cruelty to students who, you know, clearly had differences, very minor ones, but were out in the world doing their thing, just like anybody else would. So that was really negative. But the positive part was watching these students grow, be strong in the face of so much prejudice, act with dignity and grace when they were challenged with unfairness and presented with injustice. And that really struck me, and it stuck with me. And while, again, I wasn't entirely aware of what I was doing when I was writing, I think I gave Molly some of their best qualities as a sort of tribute to those kids.
I love that. And I do think it is really what sets the book apart from other types of, I guess, cozy mysteries, as you might describe it, is having that narrator who, it was a really interesting experience as a reader to experience that tension between, you, in some respects, and not all respects, but in many cases, you as the reader know more about what's going on than the narrator, which is a really interesting position to be in. And in some ways, it reminded me a little bit of, I guess also because she's a maid, it reminded me a little bit of Amelia Bedelia and that sort of,
Yes.
In a much more sophisticated way, but it taps into that sort of that love we have for a character who actually helps us question those things that we take for granted, right? Because they see the world a little bit differently. And all of a sudden we can see it the way that they do, because, you bring us so beautifully into her mind and like, let us see through her eyes. So that, I think that's really like, it's such a huge strength of the book. And it's what has really, I think, made it such a success and made people fall in love with Molly. And yet she does surprise us at the end. There's such an integrated character arc that's so tied in with the plot and the storyline that we watch her grow and learn. But also there's some surprises that she reveals at the end, and I'm not going to sort of give any spoilers away, but we do learn that like maybe all along we've been underestimating her as readers as well because of the way that she presents herself. Was that something that you were conscious of?
Very much so. Like some of those twists that happen near the end of the book were very clear to me early on in my writing process. I knew they were coming. And I think you've articulated something too that was really important to me. It was, for me, it was linked to the whole notion of mystery, how character links to mystery. And, mystery is such a difficult genre because there are so many masters of it, not to mention, Agatha Christie, who, of course, I worship. And, in many ways, I think this book is my intent as an ode to those classical mysteries that we all love. But for anyone entering the genre, the challenge is, well, how do I innovate? How do I do something that hasn't been done better by somebody else before? And that is really, really daunting. And for me, some of the solutions came in thinking about the tropes of the genre. And one of those tropes is the idea of the Sherlock Holmes, which you kind of were alluding to. The Sherlock Holmes goes into the crime scene and right away he spots everything. He knows all sorts of things and he teaches the reader what we miss. And I wanted to invert that with this character to see if I could do something original with this mystery landscape by letting the reader actually be the detective. And Molly sometimes very much missing the very obvious clues. So that was my attempt to play within the genre and yet maybe be a bit inventive with how we think of a certain trope.
Yeah, I mean, it is such a tough genre because readers have such expectations, right, of what they're coming to. So with this, we have the setup, there's so much about it that seems familiar to us. And yet, again, I like how you describe it as being inverted because it does bring a different kind of tension to it when we feel like we know more than the narrator does. So yeah, it's really interesting to hear you talk about how you approach that as, someone who is a fan of the genre and, who understands those tropes and yet understands the need to innovate within those. I think I read somewhere that you described the book actually as a combination of a whodunit and a journey of the spirit. So maybe you could speak a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, again, in my need to innovate, to find a space where I could occupy and do something a little different, I decided to blend genres. Now, I love a good genre buster. As an editor, I'm constantly looking for a book that, puts two things together in a new and exciting way. So for this book, it is a classic whodunit. There's that whodunit thriller engine. I want you to be asking questions throughout the book. Is it Rodney with a knife in the kitchen, or is it the maid with a pillow in the bedroom, and so on. There is that Clue sensibility, the board game Clue that we all played as a child. So that's one element of this. But the other element is something that the Brits call uplifting literature. And in North America, we refer to it as feel-good fiction. This is the kind of novel that is a character-driven story that moves a character from a low point at the beginning through a journey of growth towards hope at the end. Or, as you rightly put it, a journey of the spirit. So I asked myself, can I make a Frankenstein book here that on the one hand can have a thriller engine and on the other hand can actually truly at its heart be about something else entirely, which is a journey of growth where a woman is suffering from grief and just a total lack of belonging at the beginning of the novel, and only through the course of a mystery, only through going through all of those classic moments of the mystery story arc can she find belonging, identity, a sense of self, community. So that's what I set out to do.
I really love that. And I think, that's actually a new term to me. I think I inherently, when you started to describe it, I understood what you were talking about. And that is the type of reading that I'm drawn to. And I think, one of the things that maybe, and maybe you can answer this for me, is a hallmark of that genre is the fact that, like, when I was reading The Maid, even though I was very tense and I wanted to know what was going to happen, I felt safe for Molly. Like, I felt like Molly was going to end up okay in the end. And I knew that there wasn't going to be I knew she wasn't going to end up, being thrown in jail for this crime. And I hope that this doesn't give anything away for people, because I think from the very beginning, you feel that like the driving, like, as you described, the engine of it isn't a worry about what's going to happen to Molly, if something terrible is going to happen to her. I felt very safe that her journey was going to be an uplifting one at the end. And I definitely felt very satisfied when I got to the end and found where she ended up. So did you know where you were going with the ending?
I did. I found that really motivating. It's one of the lessons that I've learned from my authors, the good grace that my authors have given me, which is the gift of writing on or working on so many novels over so many years. I've learned so much about the craft of writing. And I also know, how, valuable it can be as a writer to know some things and not others. Mm-hmm. And it's that magic. You'll recognize this immediately, Amy. And if there are other writers out there who've given novel writing a try, I'm sure you'll recognize this feeling as well. And it's about knowing certain things and being completely in the dark about other things. I knew the twists and turns. I knew where the novel had to go. I knew that it would only feel complete if Molly finds herself delivered to a much better place by the end through her own endeavors and through the endeavors of the people around her who become a kind of tight-knit family. That I knew that from the beginning. What I didn't know was the architecture of, like, actually, how am I going to do this scene by scene? Some scenes I knew, some scenes I didn't. And I found that highly motivating, that I knew the major twists and that I wouldn't allow myself to write them until I'd earned the privilege of getting to those scenes. And that really kept me problem solving on the page and figuring out scene by scene, moment by moment, what are the character dynamics? What are the little twists? What are the actions within chapters that are going to take me on this ride to where I know I need to go?
I really really love that. I'm going to integrate that, I think, into my own work, because often, you know, those are the scenes that, you know, are the first scenes that you go to, because you're like, oh, I know what's going to happen.
Hold,
and then,
wait, keep a couple. They're
yes,
highly motivating.
I can definitely see that. And I think, you know, that may be, you know, for those of us that, you know, I definitely experience writer's block every now and then, that, you know, it's when you get to those sort of connective tissue parts that, you know, you sort of maybe break down a little bit, because you don't know where you're going. You know where you're going, but you're not quite sure how to get there yet. And you've done all the easy work of putting up those scenes. So yeah, I love that approach. And I think because yes, I definitely, I think, have the same, I think most writers do have that idea of those signposts along the way, that, you know, we know the main scenes that are going to happen. And, you know, no matter how many revisions you go through, those are the scenes that sort of end up being the pillars of it, in a way that don't change, you know, so much. It's just the interim stuff. I'd love to hear more about your process, actually. Did the first draft come easily to you after that first lightning bolt?
Oh, I wish it did. I don't know many authors who ever claim, oh, that was easy. You know, I've worked with hundreds, probably thousands by now, and I've never had one say, oh yeah, that was a breeze. No, it did not come easy. It is hard work. The only easy part was the lightning bolt. And then after that, everything was, you know, intense labor, deep thought, trial and error, and so on. I wake up really, really early in the morning. I love 5 a.m. That is such a weird thing to say. And if my teenage self were listening right now, she would be like, who are you? You're unrecognizable to me. I don't know what you've become, and I don't like it. However, it's the truth. I love that hour because it's quiet, it's dark. There's a part of my conscious brain that is still sort of asleep, the part that judges and says, oh, you're not good enough, and that's no good, and you don't know what you're doing, and you'll never find a solution. All of those pieces of me that are incredibly judgmental are still asleep. And so my creative brain can play at that hour. So that is when I write. And it gives me great creative freedom in my writer's cave, as I call it. And I get that work over with. And then I start my day job of working with other writers at 9 a.m. and throughout the day. And, you know, sometimes people ask me, well, how do you, like, isn't that too much? Aren't you exhausted by then? But I find the mix of solving my own problems early and then helping other people solve their problems to be quite magical. Somehow, by helping other writers work through the issues on the page, it's like, when I go back the next day and I work on my own problems, somehow magically, the work I've done with them, even if it's not a direct correlation, helps me solve my own. It helps me be a better writer.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear, because I don't edit, but I also teach, and I find that I have the same sort of relationship with my students. However, I tend to leave my work till afterwards, which is maybe not a good idea, because by that point I'm like, I'm tired of solving problems. But yeah, I think that, you know, there is something to be said for, you know, that just that engagement with other work, right? And you know, there's easy, I shouldn't say easy, but there's less difficult parts to both that maybe can play off of each other. And that maybe once you're tired of, you know, sort of working through your own problems in your own head, it's maybe fun to go and, you know, work on someone else's problems for a little while as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I find it really interesting. Like, I'm very fascinated by this sort of these two hats that you wear. Is it tough for you to switch over in the mornings after your 5 a.m. writing shift to?
It feels very natural, because I've actually been an editor much longer than I've been a writer. I've been a writer only for a very little short time, really, a novelist at least. And I've been an editor for, you know, going on 20 years. So if anything, the trepidation for me comes with stepping into the role of writer. Right. Being an editor feels tremendously familiar, and like, oh, okay, now I've landed. Now I know what to do. And, you know, if I've learned anything from the transition of these dual roles, wow, it's really to have sympathy for the writer. Because, oh my goodness, It ain't easy, as I said before. You know, when I'm editing, I know what I'm doing. When I acquire a novel, it's because I know how to help the author. I wouldn't acquire it if I didn't know how to help them. That would be ridiculous. But you know, as an author, there's a certain amount of blindness that comes with the territory that is part of the creative endeavor of writing. And, you know, I liken it to a labyrinth. You know, I often will, this is a metaphor that I've often shared with my writers. You know, being a writer, you know, you are standing in front of a labyrinth and you are going in there and you're going to take all these twists and turns and move your way through the maze to find the end of your story. That's your job as a writer. And the problem with that is that when you're on the ground like that, going in, you don't know what's ahead. You can write your way, turn left and fall into a dead end. I, as an editor, am outside. I'm on a ladder. I'm looking down. I've got a total view of the maze. You know, I can see that if you go in that direction, you're going to waste 6 months and you're going to end up at a dead end, but you can't. And I'm, you know, amazed and humbled by the fact that I've now had that experience myself of being down from the ladder. I want my ladder back. Because it is so disorienting stepping in there and not always knowing what the outcome is going to be. And so I will always be a more empathic editor because of my knowledge of just how vulnerable that writing process feels for us.
It's true. And I absolutely love that metaphor. I feel like I'm constantly trapped in a labyrinth.
That's a good thing. If you are,
yes,
that's
yes.
actually a good sign. You're in the right place.
That's a relief. How was it working with your own editor? Was that kind of a strange transition to make, or?
It was such a relief for me. You know, we hear these stories, of course, of editorial relationships that go sideways or that don't turn out so well, or there's animosity or differences of opinion. You know, I was just so relieved to have people read my work. Now, in my case, I had 3 editors, and this is not unusual with certain kinds of fiction. You know, fiction that, you know, it's a sort of a joint endeavor between 3 English language publishers, in my case, the UK, US, and Canada. Right. So my 3 editors formed this little tight triangle of incredible, opinionated, smart women who guided me through the process. So when I lost my vision, I was able to ask them questions about how to do this. Is this too much? Is this not enough? Something I call volume setting, you know, especially in a mystery. Volume setting is everything. How do you know when you've left enough clues? Have you dropped enough breadcrumbs? Is it clear that what you're trying to do with these characters and their interactions? Is it too much? Have you said too little? And so on, all this volume setting is one of the most fundamental things that an editor can help you with in a mystery. That, and, you know, making sure that for me, my voice was consistent from beginning to end and sharp, and the storytelling and. So I had the luxury of 3 incredible editors guiding me through the whole process.
That is, yeah, that's amazing. I can't even imagine, like in my mind, that kind of sounds a little bit like too many cooks in the kitchen, but I'm sure that it like really, like clearly the end result was, you know, really spectacular. And the fact that like you were able to have all of the like 3 different people acting sort of as 3 different readers, right? And, you know, sometimes I think probably when we work with our editors, like our editors also can get as caught up in our work as we do in some cases, and maybe the ladder shrinks a little bit.
Yes, that's true.
because they've read
draft.
however many drafts. Yeah. So yeah, what an amazing experience that must have been. And now that you're doing, your book has come out and you're doing all of this sort of, you know, the literary festivals and the promotional stuff, has that been were you looking forward to that part of it, or was that something you were a little nervous about?
You know, part of my job as an editor has been to remain invisible and to push my writers into the light. That is my job. Mm-hmm. And I love it. But it was a huge transition for me. And I've had all of these first moments along the way where I feel like I'm in an upside down world. Like, now, wait a second, I should be the one interviewing you and we should be talking about your book. What the heck is going on? Is this a nightmare? You know, those terrible nightmares you have where, yeah, it's one of those, right? Then I realized, no, this is a different role. And so, you know, there have been learning experiences for sure, but I'm finding comfort in being able to speak about my work. And it just, honestly, it feels like an extension of what I've always done, with the new experience of being a little bit more public facing than I have with my work in the past. But really, I've only ever been good at one thing. You know, I can tell stories, or I can help people tell stories. And other than that, not really tremendously talented. But I've got this one thing that I can do in a couple of different ways. Thank goodness.
I definitely think that many writers can relate to that as well. You know, we all sort of gravitate towards any kind of employment that involves stories and words, you know, whether it ends up being as an editor, a writer, a bookseller, whatever it might be, working at a library, running a literary festival, all of these things that put us in proximity to the stories that we love.
Yes.
So yeah, it never surprises me when I see people make those transitions from, you know, one area to another. So yeah, I think it's really about that ability to connect with the readers and you know, sort of have your see the life that your book has once it goes out into the world. And you've been very lucky to have you know, a very big readership, so that's very exciting.
It is. I mean, as I say, like, my readers are everything to me, whether they are library readers or independent bookstore readers, you know, it doesn't matter. A reader is a reader.
Yes, absolutely. And I was just reading before we came on here that there is going to be a movie.
There is. Yep, that was another pinch me moment for sure, Amy. So Universal Pictures has optioned the film, and Florence Pugh, who is the Academy Award nominee for Little Women and was in Midsummer and in Black Widow more recently, is set to star as Molly and also to executive produce the film alongside with myself. And that is a little exciting.
That is incredible. Wow. I can't imagine a better actress for that part. I think this is going to be amazing.
Exactly. Me neither. And there's something so unusual about her. What I love about her is that she just seems to eschew every reasonable choice on screen and goes for the craziest, most outrageous option and then manages to land it. And I think that really is an extraordinary quality, and it sets her apart. It makes her already a kind of different actor amongst her generation. And so if you pair that unusual ability to choose something different with a character as different as Molly, I think it's going to be pretty darn cool.
That is a match made in heaven, definitely.
Yeah.
How involved have you been in the process?
So I'm there for sure. You know, we're working on next steps. I can't say too much, but I can say that, you know, I'm not working on the screenplay. Others are. I'm tremendously excited by what's going on, but I can't say anything more than that. But yeah, I have been involved. And for me, the really exciting thing about the possibilities of a film is that it is a translation of a work of art. You know, it's a different medium. And for me, my job as a writer in terms of the setting of the Regency Grand Hotel, the sophisticated, opulent setting that of course turns out to have a lot of dirt and secrets hiding behind all those closed doors, was to invite the reader into the memories they have of hotels, you know, to give you a few details, just the vaguest sort of shell, and then for you to decorate that space with imagery from your own experience. That's how a book works. That's not how a film works. So can you imagine? For me, the most exciting thing is going to be able to, you know, watch as that film rolls out and we step into the Regency Grand Hotel and we see it in Technicolor. We see every single detail. It's a feast for the eyes. It's just complete eye candy. And for me, that is going to be so much fun.
I think that's going to be really fun for your readers as well, for all the people that have fallen in love with the Regency, for all the people that have fallen in love with Molly, to see that on screen. That's going to be really amazing. Congratulations.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But it's also a big question mark. It's like you were saying that, when I read Molly, that's how you hear her, which is sometimes true and sometimes isn't true, depending on the individual. And, the image of the Regency Grand that each person has in their head, is it going to match the film or isn't it? And how will people react to that? I don't know, but it's going to be fun.
It's going to be fun to find out. And, down the road when they do like the remake in 10 years, because that's what Hollywood does, then there'll be another
a different Regency Grand.
Exactly. I would really like to sort of open this up to some questions from the audience here. If a movie is made, Nita Prose needs to play Molly.
Oh gosh, no, Florence Pugh will do a much better job, but I really hope I get a cameo. I would, if I had my druthers, I would be like just a little lowly maid in the background who's like polishing a vase, that would be just the coolest thing in the world.
I think it's Stephen King that does that potentially, or there's some author who generally makes cameos.
Margaret Atwood has done it too.
Oh, has she?
In The Handmaid's Tale, she appears at one point.
Yeah, I suppose if you're Stephen King or Margaret Atwood, you can.
I'm not quite there.
Yeah. Let's see. We have another question here from the library. This book created such a buzz before it was even released. How did that happen?
Well, I have good publishers, and a good agent. And I think they saw the potential for this to be the kind of book that could, that people in different places in different countries could relate to. And so I think that the buzz around it was because they did their jobs after I did mine.
Yeah, it really is. I think it tends to be a convergence of so many different things, right? That makes a book get that kind of buzz. It's the writing, it's the publicity, it's the timing as well.
The early reads are massively important.
Yes, absolutely. And, you had some really great endorsements as well from some pretty heavy hitters, which I think really does make a difference, for a lot of readers who are looking for books. But I definitely think it does also, it's that hopefulness, I think, that is something that people are looking for right now. And I think it really sort of, aside from all of those things we're talking about, like the publicity and all of those, the relatability, all that stuff, like I think it really does tap into something that people are looking for and that people, need after the past few years and everything that's been going on. We need that hope. We need to see somebody sort of, come out on top and have that uplift storyline. Yes, it is so nice to cheer for a character and see her triumph.
Oh, that's a lovely comment. Thank you.
And I'm noticing here someone pointed out it's Stan Lee who does the cameos.
Stan Lee. Yes,
Stan
you're
Lee,
absolutely right.
Yes. I'm going to see if there's any other questions here. If not, I have definitely a ton more I want to ask you. I know we're running out of time here, but I want to make sure that everyone gets their questions in as well. So there's a question here about, do you find yourself thinking as an editor as you were writing?
I do, but it comes and goes. Usually on my first draft, there's no awareness of the editor part of me. I'm just trying to get it down. And I really don't, if the editor part comes up and it's like, oh, that's not very good, that's bad, I just tell her to go away. Just take a hike. I don't need you right now. My goal with a first draft is really just to get the architecture, to find a sense of movement, of tone, of how we get from moment to moment without judging myself too harshly on exactitude. But I will say that part of my process, I'll usually write during my morning stint, which I described earlier. And the next morning I'll go back and read what I wrote, and I'll start to think more like an editor. What was my goal in this chapter or in this moment, in this scene? Have I reached my goal, or is there something that I need to do now that I can do quickly that is going to punch this up? That's the thought of an editor, really, and the work that results from that is the kind that a writer would do after an editorial note. So I do a little bit of that. when I re-begin my next day. I start as an editor and then I finish that writing day as a writer.
That seems like a really great process, because I think, I think even writers who've never done any editing in their life still have that voice that they have to shut off when they're creating. And, it's that self-editing, that self-censoring that we do when we first start that really inhibits that creative process, I think. So it's really great that you're able to sort of separate those and be able to come back at it later from that editorial perspective.
The other thing we have in common that someone has just pointed out is that we are wearing the same glasses.
I know. It's the writer glasses. I've only recently entered my progressive years, so
I'm on my way, dear. I'm on my way.
Someone else asked here if they missed a mention of new books. So are you working on something new?
Yeah, I can tell you a little bit about that. I am working on a few things. And I can say that, many of the readers who have enjoyed The Maid have asked me, are you going to give us more? Can we please have more? We would love a sequel to The Maid. And I am listening, and so are my publishers. I promise you that. That being said, my job with the first book was to leave you wanting more, right? It is a feel-good, uplit novel. It's a journey of the spirit. You should feel hopeful and buoyed and want more Molly by the end if I've done my job right. So then my challenge going into another book that has Molly as a central character, if I choose to do so, is how do I give you more without actually giving you less? And that is my challenge at the moment, which I am trying to figure out. So I may be offering more Molly in 2024, or I may be giving you something entirely different. Regardless, whatever it's going to be, I'm afraid I cannot escape myself. So it will have the hallmarks of a me book, which is usually going to be a Frankenstein thing between two things with a very strong voice of a misfit. I don't know why that is.
I think that's something that really speaks to people. And yeah, I think that's something that, we all want to give voice to as writers in some way, right? Like the people who sort of exist on the fringes, on the outside of things. And yeah, that's really exciting to hear there may be more Molly, or maybe more Molly-esque adventures. Maybe we'll get the adventures of Rodney the bartender later.
I think my readers would like him dead, but
yes. We don't want to hear anything more about Rodney.
Yeah.
How does a writer find an editor? So how did you end up finding your editor, Nita?
Well, you don't actually find an editor. You find an agent. Mm-hmm. So that's really the first step. When you have a manuscript where you've done as much work as you can, meaning you've taken some classes, you've informed yourself about the business, you've done some rewrites with the help of some, advice from other writers or wannabe writers or whoever else you think might give you some good advice. Well, at that point, when you feel you've gone as far as you can as a writer, then perhaps your next step is testing the waters to see if you can get an agent. That is the way that writers get published. It's through agencies, having somebody represent your work to the various publishers in your territory. Mine happens to be Canada, my home territory, and around the world. So, I did that just like everybody else, even though I'm in the business. It's like, okay, well, I need an agent too. And so I had to go through that very trying and nail-biting, difficult process of finding the right agent for my work. And, I was tremendously lucky to get the agent of my dreams for this book and in general, somebody who really understood Uplit, because she is the agent behind Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, a novel that came out several years ago and that really was a genre-bending novel that defined a character that could be prickly as a cactus and yet intensely lovable and take us on a journey that begins in darkness and ends in light. And because she recognized what that novel was before it even had a name, before that we knew what that was called, before it was Uplit, before it was feel-good fiction, that agent, Maddie Milburn, understood that work. And so for me, it was, she was my dream agent. And I was beyond happy. That really was a fall on your knees moment when Maddie said, yeah, I'll take it on.
Amazing. It really does make a difference to have someone in your corner who
Absolutely.
sees your vision, knows what you're doing, knows what you're trying to do, and can advocate for you in those settings. Yeah.
And then from there, it's a matter of people offer on your work, various publishers offer, and then, the offer that you get accepted, that whoever that is becomes your editor, right? And there's all kinds of meetings that happen where you get to know each other, you get to talk about the work, you get to see if your goals as writer and editor align, which is hugely important. Hugely important.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see, I don't think there's any more questions here from the audience. I think I got them all. Please give me a shout if I did not. I was going to ask if you had, outside of Molly, if you had a favorite character in the book.
Oh, Giselle is a really interesting character to me. I mean, Gran is by far my favorite because she's so personal to me. In many ways, she's my mother. At least in her best characteristics, that desire to always unconditionally love those who are her own, is very much my mother. But Giselle is a character who challenged me, and I judged her harshly at the beginning. I thought she was just going to be, a trophy wife and nothing but this sort of scourge of a woman who betrays other women for her own gain and is superficial and materialistic and a money grabber. And she wouldn't stay that way. And she taught me a lot by not staying that way. Every time I put her in a scene with Molly, I could not escape the inevitable conclusion that they were incredibly alike in different ways, because Molly is invisible in the world of the Regency Grand, and everybody treats her like garbage because of her job as a maid. Well, Giselle is highly visible. She's a trophy wife. She's in all the, the glossy mags every day. But she too, her true self is almost entirely invisible. She has to put on a facade every time she goes out as eye candy on Mr. Black's arm. And I put those two characters together and then quickly realized, wow, they're not so different after all. They're both invisible in different ways. And of course, there's a deep connection and, dare I say, friendship, and a very odd friendship that transpires and grows between these two women who are so on the surface different, and finally in their hearts not so different at all.
Yeah, I actually really loved that relationship. I love seeing surprising depictions of, female relationships in books where, we're so used to seeing female characters pitted against each other in competition or, treating each other poorly in books. And it's so nice to see. It was so nice to see. I mean, for all of, for everything that, Giselle did put Molly through, in some ways, Molly saw her in a way that other people didn't, right?
Yes, exactly.
And again, that's also, one of the really special things about Molly and what she brings to the reader is that ability to see things in a different way, because we are able to see them through her eyes, which I think is very special. And, because of that relationship was able to blossom. So yeah, I think that's probably it. We're almost to the end. I do have one last question for you.
All right.
Do you have a favorite dish at Olive Garden?
Oh my goodness. That is a hilarious question. I don't think I've ever been asked that. Okay. So the thing about the Olive Garden is, you have these moments as a writer where you're all alone, like you're just in your story and you're just trying to get through, and you kind of have to amuse yourself a little. And the Olive Garden, the insertion of the Olive Garden was me amusing myself. So I have this friend, don't tell her, but she's in love with the Olive Garden. She's just mad about the Olive Garden. She thinks it's the best restaurant on earth. And, inserting the Olive Garden into the book and having Molly be in love with the food there was like, a little tip of the hat, a little Easter egg, mostly for myself, and then later for her when she read the book. So no, I don't really have a favorite. Like, I'm all for free, garlic bread and salad. That's really cool. But, it's not going to be high on my list of go-to restaurants.
It's such a great detail about Molly that she loves the tour of Italy.
Oh, she loves it. Oh,
Yeah,
she loves
yeah,
it.
it's-
And you know
it's-
what's been really fun is when fans of the book send me pictures of them eating the tour of Italy. It's my favorite thing in the world.
Amazing. Well, maybe we'll get you some product placement bucks in there too. I think I see Michelle on here, so I think we're probably ready to wrap up here. Thank you so much, Nita. This has been so much fun.
Oh,
I didn't get to
Amy.
ask you half of the millions of questions that I wanted to, so hopefully we'll encounter each other in another scenario and I can grill you some more about your book.
Well, I'm a fan, vice versa. So it has been such a lovely time with you tonight. And thank you for asking such wonderful insights.
Oh, thank you.
And thanks to everyone at Starfest for joining us tonight. It's so nice to have you all here joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. This was a really nice way to kick things off. And you couldn't hear me giggling away the whole time. Good thing I was on mute.
Could hear me giggling.
Yeah, because I was laughing a lot. So thank you so much, Nita and Amy, for saying yes. It's always very exciting when, we get this big name author and then we're able to find the great interviewer. And this was a lovely, lovely conversation. So thank you everyone for supporting Starfest, and I'm going to say good night. So good night, Nita.
Good night.
Good night,
Thank you,
Amy.
Michelle.
Good night,
Good night,
everybody.
everyone.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.